I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives.
Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today's guest is Reverend Van Austin, who is an ordained religious science minister and is the founder of Spirit Rocks here in Santa Fe. And it's one of the topics we're going to talk about today. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thanks, Reverend Phil. It's such a nice thing to be here.
Great to have you. We're going to have fun today. So today's prophetic topic comes from a daily quote that was posted on the Spirit Rocks website. It was under another name, so it's in transition. Used to be the Inspiration Center. Right. And the quote is entitled, Getting Off the Roller Coaster Ride. And the actual prophetic topic is when you're in love with life itself. Mm-hmm. So the whole quote is as follows. The key to individual relationships is to stay open and harmonious with all of life. This takes the need and the drama out of any particular relationship. After all, no one person can consistently fulfill you. That's a delusion. Mm-hmm. Only God, life and love within and without can do that. And how can you not be loving in individual relationships when you're in love with life itself? Beautiful quote. We'll talk about that. But before we get into anything else, tell us, what got you on this path? What was that path look like that got you to Spirit Rocks?
Yeah, that's a great question. By the way, I love that quote. That's so right. No one person can bring you happiness. You know, some people think that it's just around the next corner. It's that person. It's if I make this move. It's if I get in shape. And it's never any one of those things. It's something inside. And I guess I recognized that gazillions of years ago, and yet I was sort of, swimming about in the great ocean of what's it all about, Alfie. And I was a psychotherapist, and that was my beginning, I think, to saying I wanted to work in some way that talks about the soul, what it is to be a human being. And I took that as far as I could as a therapist, and I continue to be a therapist, but I felt that other doors were opening. I got into some radio and some TV like you're doing, and I started to talk to some of my heroes. That my hero at the time was Wayne Dyer. And when he came on the show, I was so nervous. It was a radio show. He wasn't in the studio. He was on the phone. But I had to go home and meditate for a while. I had to write out all my questions. I just had absolute rigor mortis of the cerebellum. And somehow I managed to get through that interview. And he came on the show again 8 times. This was in a little town in Virginia with about probably 100 listeners. And if Wayne Dyer had known, he never would have come. But I talked to all my heroes then, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Thomas More, who wrote Care of the Soul, Mary Manon Morrissey. There's so many people, Dan Millman. And I loved Steve Allen, who was a fantastic guest. He wasn't exactly in the New Thought movement. But I had a lovely time doing that. And then I got into TV, and I just talked about whatever I felt like talking about every week. And I loved it. That was the beginning. Then I continued my ministerial studies and became a minister in religious science. And I was a minister last year in Colorado of my own church, a big church, and it was really fun. It was my training ground. But my wife, Miriam, and I always wanted to come to Santa Fe. It was our dream city. And we thought, we've got one more move in us. Let's do it. So we went to Santa Fe, came to Santa Fe just 2 months ago. And I opened a place called the Inspiration Center. The story is a little circuitous. It was going to be the Celebration Center. My friend Carol Rothman said, Van, there's a place called the Celebration here. It's been here for 40 years.
Yeah.
So then it became the Inspiration Center. Then I wheeled out my Yamaha motif and started playing some of my songs, and people said, we're turning this into a different place. It's going to be Spirit Rocks, and it's going to be about music and creativity. And that's what's happening. And it's as if I'm in a dream, and it's unfolding, and I'm just loving every second of it.
let's talk a little bit about religious science. What was that something you were born into? Was that something you kind of came across and found to be resonating with you?
I was born Episcopalian, Reverend Phil, and whatever that means to be born into a faith. I mean, that was my parents' path. And I was actually an acolyte when I was 10 years old. And I was really taken by all the mystique of the beautiful lighting, the beautiful music, the candlelight, something about the heart that was happening. But the actual message in the church would leave me a little cold sometimes. The Bible readings weren't speaking to me, and it's just my path. I'm just different that way. So when I walked into Robert Bitzer's church in Hollywood, California, it was the first religious science church outside of Ernest Holmes, and Holmes was the founder of religious science. And Bitzer was his first hire, and Robert Bitzer at age 90 was a lion. The guy was unbelievable. I was about 36 or 7. Robert Bitzer would stand up in the pulpit shakily, but by the end he was just soaring. The message was, God is within you. You know, the message is that the kingdom of heaven is within you. I mean, it's been said in all religions, but you can only find that love, that intelligence, that creativity, that guidance, that beauty inside you. And that was the thing that spoke to me instantly. And it dovetailed with psychology. I felt that, it was somehow inside us. And I just began studying, and Robert Bitzer was my advertisement for this stuff vitalizes you. This is vital stuff. And I just kept going.
I mean, you had mentioned that Christian denominations, all of them, I mean, Jesus said it, the kingdom of God is within. Yet why do you think it's not as pronounced as it, I mean, Jesus was talking about, but the church really doesn't give it as much airplay?
Yeah. You're right, and I think Jesus in his own day wasn't probably saying, I am God. He was saying, I'm intimately connected with God. God is my Father, and I'm his beloved. And he was so connected, more connected than, say, Pharisees and the folks that were living by a very scrupulous religious law. He was actually in dialogue with that source within him. He was connected deeply with the source within him. And so Jesus was a revolutionary that way, but he wasn't, I don't think, a terrorist. He wasn't trying to tear the system down. He was just simply trying to wake people up, and it was misinterpreted then. And I think the church fathers then began to say, well, we've got to create something in the spirit of what's gone before. And there was Mithra, and there was Zeus, and the Greek gods, and there were the Egyptian gods. We need a God here. And we need a God that people can relate to, not some abstract. So Jesus became it through Paul. And that began a whole history of a church sense that Jesus is God, but you're not, and I'm not, and David's not, and that's not true. Because we are all expressions of it. That's what religious science is. That's not true in my way of seeing things, so I'll qualify it that way. But I feel as if God is expressing beautifully, flourishing all through life. You look at a child's smile. You look at a puppy dog. You look at a mountain. You look at an eagle flying. You see the creativity of man. It's coming through everything, and that's the beauty of what I think religious science offers. New thought offers. We see that this creation is God in expression.
So then, in religious science in particular, their concept of original sin is non-existent.
It's really non-existent. The idea is that it's a mistake or missing the mark, from the Roman archery term to sin. But it's the idea that a guilt about who you are, an original sin guilt, that there's something wrong with you, you inherited it from some mistake, some immorality of distant ancestors, is kind of silly. It almost flies in the face of nature. Christianity, the way it's come about, has almost been taken out of nature and is suspicious of nature. There's that snake in the garden. This natural force. We got to be suspicious and watch out. Our sexuality, we've got to be suspicious of that. But the idea in a new thought is that no, there's no guilt, no shame about who we are. The only sorrow would be not to express fully who you are. And maybe that, if there's a sin, maybe that would be it. It's not to be fully who you are, because by the end of your life you go, gee, I could have had a V8. I mean, I didn't quite step up to bat here.
There's a great quote by Edgar Cayce, that original sin is the use of creative forces for selfish purpose.
Selfish purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And I
That's a beautiful quote.
Yeah, I much subscribe. I have a whole thing with Casey. So, but let's get back to religious science. So it teaches God's within, and then it goes further with that. It teaches us how to use that internal connection to grow not only spiritually but physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yes. And I love that Casey quote because it's selfishness that separates us out. It's when we get into our little self, our small self, not the Christ consciousness that is talked about in New Thought or even Christian love, let's say, or the sense of Atman and Brahman in Hinduism, that oneness between God and ourselves. But when we separate out of that, when we begin to get into the little hamster track, the little hamster wheel of, oh my God, why did that have to happen? And was that okay? And I'm worried about this. And ooh, that was terrible before. And we're not actually right here, right now. We're either in the past or we're in the future, psychologically speaking, and we're not centered here. So we're becoming selfish. The small self is taken over. This mental laboratory is working overtime now, and we're not actually connected with what is. And in connection with what is, that's when we're free. So this is what I think New Thought is really teaching, is to be really present and trusting of a power that's greater than ourselves. Of course, I mean, you go to Niagara Falls, that's a huge power, and that ain't me. That's just life. But it flows through you, Dr. Phil. It's flowing through you right this second. And
Dr. Phil's the bald guy.
Dr. Phil's the bald guy. You're the guy with the flowing mane. Yeah, and Reverend Phil. So that's exactly how I see it, is that, we are expressions of that, but there can be a certain humility, and I don't mean by putting that as putting ourselves down, but there can be a certain sense of, there needs to be a certain sense of connection to something infinite, but we are an expression of that.
And the more we develop that muscle, the more we're able to achieve.
I believe that is exactly right, because you are freed up from all the senses of, how they say in Hinduism, I love this, that your duty, your dharma, is to bring your gifts into the world. How they are experienced by other people is not your business. The fruits of your labors, of your creative work or your work in the world, is not for you to be. That's what the Bhagavad Gita talks about. You're not to really pay attention to that. You're only to pay attention to doing what your heart and soul and intelligence tells you to do, and doing it well. And so I think this teaching is about getting out of living from the outside in, other people pulling your strings. Did this please them? Was that okay? Did I do all right? And instead, just come from the very center of your being and bring what you know you want to bring, what's important to bring for you. And if you do that, there's a sort of universal truth, because you're coming from that river inside that flows through everyone. If you can think of the universal heart as a kind of giant river, and we're coming from that place when we're plugged in to our truth deep inside.
So you wound up becoming a religious science minister.
Yeah.
Obviously resonates with you. You talk very passionately about it. Is Spirit Rocks a religious science ministry, or is that now, has it grown or morphed into something different?
I think that's what's happening. I don't know about different, but it's taking in other ideas. There are so many beautiful modern writers. I particularly like Eckhart Tolle. I was thinking about another guy, Eknath Easwaran. Eckhart Tolle.
He's a favorite of mine.
He's a favorite of mine too. But Eckhart Tolle is great. Eknath is a great favorite of mine. Deepak Chopra is a wonderful writer. A lot of really wonderful, good new writers that go beyond New Thought, which is unity, religious science, and divine science, which is now almost not happening anymore. But that was the original one. Ernest Holmes was an ordained divine science minister before he became the founder of religious science. But it's such a beautiful idea, New Thought, that it is done unto us as we believe, that we can change our thinking and change our lives, that we can, by that I don't mean we have to brainwash ourselves and crank up an affirmation every 5 minutes. I just think we have to change our perspective. We have to see things from an empowering point of view, from the point of view of good, instead of the point of view of how things are screwed up. It's like, you can be bitter or better. So that's what I think New Thought offers. But then people like Tolle offer this whole new thing about, look, the power of now. When we're totally present, then we can fully unfold that intelligence that's essentially an empty space waiting to be filled. It's as if it's a waveform waiting to become a particle or actual manifestation. And we can't get in touch with that until we get very still inside. And so these are some of the ideas that I find exciting that go a little beyond what's happening in traditional New Thought.
But all these ideas are not new. I mean, they're back in the very basics of Vedic literature, restated in Buddhist terms. I mean, Taoist terms.
You're so right on. That's right.
So I mean, being in the moment is essential.
Yes. Yes.
And I have my own theories about, the title of the show, Words of the Prophets. When I chose this title, it was a specific reason. I think I even say it in either one of my ads on TV or the beginning. I forget what they sound like anymore. It's been a while since I did it. But basically, that God kept sending us prophets for specific cultures, specific paths. And at some point, God realized that as soon as the prophet left, we were distorting the message. And then, so keep sending more prophets again, keep trying to get us that message.
Yeah, right.
And that's how I see Eckhart Tolle. He's not teaching anything new.
He's basically
teaching
Buddhist,
basic stuff, but reaching a whole new audience, just like Deepak Chopra is. I mean, Ishwaran to me is more of a traditionalist. I mean, he does those. I've got about 3 or 4 of his books and translations of the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and stuff like that. So I put him in a little bit separate category.
He's so fascinating, this man Eknath Easwaran, because he also includes mystic Christianity, Taoism. He'll talk about any of the major or even minor world paths equally as adeptly. He's a pretty amazing scholar. He died about 10 years ago now?
I'm not. I'm chronologically challenged.
But he's wonderful. No, there's nothing new under the sun, and that's what's so great. But new voices have to speak to new ears, because people aren't tuned in to the biblical hyperbole. The huge metaphoric language that goes on there, the Red Sea parting, things like this. In my view, and I'm extremely aware that these things could have happened. Who am I to say they couldn't have happened? But in my experience, nothing like that has ever happened. So I tend to think of it as being a huge image of serendipity in some way happening for those people to allow them to escape from Egypt. And I don't know how literal it is, but as a metaphor, it's brilliant. And I like Joseph Campbell's work in metaphor that way, that we tend to take religion literally, and that's the great sadness, because then we get chained to concrete ideas that really don't serve us in the end. And when we get metaphorical about it and realize what it's trying to say in a poetic way, then we can be empowered and ennobled and strengthened by that kind of message, and it brings us to a higher place.
When I first read the Dhammapada, and it was Ishwaran's translation.
That's a great translation. I love that one.
And it just dawned on me at that point, just what you're saying, that the difference between Buddha and Jesus was Buddha didn't really talk that much in metaphors and parables.
No.
He was just like straight up.
Mm-hmm.
It was understandable concepts using things of the day, but they hold up over time.
Yes.
Jesus didn't.
Yes.
Jesus talked in metaphors and parables and or taught in it. And I really believe that's part of the problem, that the church just kind of didn't understand what they were being taught, and they drifted.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, because I used to do on the radio, when I was doing radio, I did a series of shows comparing Buddha's life and Jesus' life and their teachings, and how similar the lives were and how similar the teachings were. But it was always in the wording.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. It's just so important to...
Different teachers for different times, and
Exactly.
Buddha was almost doctor-like. He came from an area of India, apparently, where there were a lot of doctors being trained, and so there are lists of things. And so in Buddha's Eightfold Path, you'll see lists of things you're supposed to do, and each one will be repeated to get to the next one, so that there's a sequential thing and an oral history that's being passed along. That's the way that appealed to the Indian mind at the time, and in Jesus's time, the people of Galilee wanted to hear parabolic stories, and that was the way that he was able to be effective.
Did they want to hear them? I've used the example a couple of times of, if I was to get to meet a Nobel Prize winning astrophysicist, and I was going to take their information on the creation, formation, and function of a black hole and teach it to a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, I would have to, for lack of a better term, simplify it, dummy it down. Would I not teach in parables? Would I not teach in metaphors, thinking they're going to understand this is a parable and a metaphor, and they're not? I mean, Jesus was taking a message that I believe was coming directly from the divine and teaching it to a bunch of people who were not educated. They were fishermen, they were, laborers of the day. These weren't scholars that he was working with, that he attracted to him for the most part.
Right.
So it's like, I think he was giving it in a way he thought they would understand it, and they still, because he wouldn't hang around long enough to clarify it, they just didn't understand it.
I think, like all great teachers, probably Christ got his point across by the force of who he was. It's like Emerson's quote, who you're being is shouting so loud I can't hear a word you're saying. But if you sort of inverted that, who he was positively was speaking so loudly that I think they got the message. And the parables were for an uneducated bunch of folks. He came for the poor and the dispossessed, and they didn't have much schooling at all. And so to talk even in an academic or a very logically sequential way would probably put them to sleep because they're not used to that. But tell them a good story, yeah, they'll stay awake for that. So maybe they didn't get the message directly, but they got it, and maybe they couldn't translate it well. And I don't think anybody was able to really live what he was saying. I mean, he was saying, it's easy to treat people you love well. You should treat your enemies well. Somebody asks you to walk an extra mile, go an extra mile beyond that. Give them your coat if they ask for your shirt. And people, that was radical. But this is the essential idea within that is that, only love can conquer hate, just like the Buddha said. Hate can't conquer hate. And you've got to let go of your aggression, stand down, get into a place where you can be in a sense of harmony with a person. And then life goes on the way it's supposed to. Life can bloom the way it's supposed to. Otherwise, we come to what's happened in so many parts of the world where there's just destruction and sadness and broken life.
Ego,
yeah.
So let's get back to Spirit Rocks. So
yeah,
you
I
came
love
here,
doing that.
yeah, and you started the Inspiration Center, and seems to have very rapidly metamorphed into Spirit Rocks. You want to talk about both of them and them
so
and
rapid.
you and how that all...
Thank God it's rapid. I was talking to a reverend friend of mine in Sedona. She lives down in Sedona, and she said when she goes to their Chamber of Commerce to present her new ideas for what she wants to do, she wants to have it right there ready and doesn't want to present herself twice as two different people. Luckily, this happened very quickly that I had the Inspiration Center for just some weeks. That was going to be a new thought center with other ideas inflecting it.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. For the people watching who may not, can you distinguish New Thought, define it, and distinguish it from religious science?
It's not distinguishable from religious science because religious science is New Thought. It's a New Thought path. But New Thought at large is really just basically speaking to the idea that as you conceive of something, because you're a co-creator with the ultimate, the infinite force of God. You know, we call it God, we could call it Ralph. It's that intelligence that flows through us that makes this mystery up, and who can define this mystery? It's like they say in Taoism, the Tao that can be defined is not the Tao. We can't put words on something. We're not wired to know what created us or how this creation itself came into being, of which we're a part. So the idea in New Thought is that we co-create with that power when we feel it within ourselves, when we connect with it within. And only in that connection within do we come into our full power as people. And that's when they say change your thinking, change your life. That's what they're saying. Become aware of that great power within you, and it can flow through you into your life. That's New Thought, and that's religious science. Religious science takes it one step further than, say, unity, which pretty much keeps it there with a Christian overlay. But religious science says that's exactly how we feel, and there's a law. It's an interesting thing. And this law is that a mental equivalent of something creates the thing itself. So if you are, without doubt and with complete faith, centered on a certain understanding, that understanding will begin to flower into your life. That will take form in the manifest world. It's as if you make a mental mold and pour in this thought, and out comes the outpicturing of it. In the go ahead.
I was going to say, but the thought does not have to necessarily be productive or positive. It could be negative and destructive, but if we focus in on it, we create it.
And the law is still working if it's negative, is the idea.
Exactly.
So you can be thinking doom and destruction to yourself. I'll never do this. I'm a total failure at this. This won't work. I can't do this. The law makes that happen. As you believe, so it is done unto you. So the idea is to learn how to use the law positively. Good point. And that's religious science. That's its addition to what New Thought basically teaches, which is our connection to the good is what brings good into our lives.
So going back to the ancient teachings, isn't that really what karma teaches us from the ancient Vedic literature? What I think, what I feel, what I believe is made manifest in my life?
It is cause and effect. It is karma. Absolutely. It's the same thing. And I think it's put into language that appeals more to a modern population, so that if you say karma to somebody, some people might say, well, that does smack of Hinduism and Buddhism and that other part of the world, and I'm not interested in that. That sounds a little spooky to me. But if you talk about cause and effect, that's a good way to put it. And then if you get into the idea of it's done unto you as you believe, there's the Christian understanding coming through. All these things just add layers to an ancient understanding. You're so wise in pointing these things out, Reverend Phil. It's true. It's not new. New Thought is not new. Sometimes called New Thought ancient traditions or ancient wisdom.
Well, I think New Thought, what I was trying to clarify for the audience, which I think you did, was New Thought has a variety of paths. It's not, the religious science is one of the paths that came out of it.
Yes. And
Christian Science is one of them. Unity, United, Unitarian.
Well, Christian Science is considered sort of a distant cousin. It's not really considered New Thought. They have some ideas which are particular to them, some of the healing ideas, etc. So they're not really part of New Thought. New Thought is unity and religious science, and still divine science, which exists in a few places in the country still, maybe in the world, I'm not sure. But it was the original one. So that's what's happened in the evolution of New Thought. I think the idea, just to say about what's so important about it, is not that New Thought is new, it's that you can have a new thought. You don't have to be stuck with your old thinking. New thinking is what it's about. Don't put new wine in old wineskins.
Okay. So we keep coming back to the same statement. That transition from Inspiration Center to Spirit Rocks.
Oh, good. Back to Spirit Rocks.
Yes.
I'm still amazed by Spirit Rocks. I can't even say it and know it's my center quite yet. It's so new. It's about 3 weeks old now. And I've played, I have this Yamaha motif, which is just a sensational 88-key keyboard with band sounds in it that are just so realistic, and it's intuitively digital. It can just follow me wherever I go. So I write songs, and I sing and perform with a friend of mine named Steve Englander, who's excellent on guitar and background vocals and a great guy. And so the two of us are playing, and Mark Perry came down and played congas one day. We're opening it up to people all through Santa Fe to come. from wherever if they're coming through town, please stop by Spirit Rocks. The idea is that what I want to do with this center is bring the extra dimension of living your dreams into spirituality. So that spirituality isn't just a cognitive experience or even an internal experience only, but that what it does is free and release the individual, bring their gifts into life, which is where I think real joy happens. I think that's where real joy happens. I think we can have it fleetingly in meditation, not even so fleetingly. I think we can go through days and days feeling quite buoyed up by spiritual awareness and experience. But until we come full circle and really express ourselves, I think we're missing that absolutely paramount important idea of giving the gifts that were sown into your soul to the world. That's what they're there for. And if you don't do it, you're almost turning your back on something. It's as if you're disconnecting from the force that made you. That force wants to express as you. You're doing it, Reverend Phil.
Definitely. So, music. How do you see music fitting into this dynamic? I mean, it seems to be the focus, so can you elaborate on that?
It's a good thing to talk about because it's all coming into focus more clearly every week. Originally it was going to be music as the message and the songs that I'm writing and the lyrics and what's coming through that. But I feel like with Wayne Dyer, my old hero, that universe means one song, and we're in this one song together. Everybody's playing their harmonic part. Everybody. Whether you're a teacher, a mom, a person who smiles at another person and empowers them to feel good about themselves that day, you're creating then. Or whether you're a writer or a horseback rider, or whether you're someone who works with tools and whatever it is, you're creating something. You're meant to be giving those gifts. So music in that sense is sort of a universal creativity that I'm talking about. And I want the center to, yes, be centered in music, because music goes right from the person playing to, boom, your ears, your heart in a very physical way. Sound waves actually connect you. It's a very powerful art form. And yet I'm just as interested in people bringing their art, expressing their art in whatever form it might be. And as I said, it might have nothing to do with the arts, but it might have to do with just the palette they're painting from, whether it's culinary or parental, working with animals. These are all beautiful things, and this is what people need to be doing, expressing themselves and knowing and feeling their full power flowing through them. That's when they make the fullest connection with that infinite power.
Yet you're still focusing in on music. You're featuring it.
Featuring it because
I mean, you're not calling
play.
the center like, creative living or something. You're saying Spirit Rocks.
Yeah, well, it does. And you know how they say somebody's rocking a new outfit. Somebody's rocking, that's a rocking kind of attitude. Somebody's rocking that painting's rocking. So the idea is not just that music rocks, spirit rocks. And the idea is that your spirit is what's important. I've always felt this way, Reverend Phil, that spirituality is about your spirit. It's not about something out there. It's about one's own spirit, because that's the universal you only can find it inside. You're only plugged into it inside. So when your spirit is strong, and that's when God's work, if you will, is being done in the world. And that's what I want this center to be. So Spirit Rocks. And it's whatever you do that rocks, that rocks you, it's going to rock other people if it rocks you.
That's it. And I guess it's just a matter of just being an old hippie. When I hear rocks, I hear music.
Yeah, you hear music.
Yeah, so I'm, yeah.
Well, it was the original thing. It's going to be all about music, but I think really it needs to be much more universal than that. And so...
So how do you envision, or not even how do you envision, but how do you envision, and somebody's going to, a little bit later I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to let people know where to find you, what time to find you and everything, but somebody's going to walk into Spirit Rocks this coming Sunday.
Hey.
What's that experience going to look like for them?
They're going to come to Little Wing Theater, so it's a performance space, and as they walk in, there's going to be music playing. The band will be doing something fun. And so instantly people begin to have an exciting experience. I've been to enough church services, even in the New Thought world, where there's a sort of, there's a progression of the program which is a little bit formulaic. And one tends to kind of half go to sleep spiritually within that. I want every moment in that time to be comfortable, but comfortably enlivening, comfortably vitalizing, welcoming, loving, happy. I think joy is the highest synonym for God, personally, and I feel as if joy can be very quiet, very, very quiet, or it can be, happy-footed. But it can be all the things in between, too. And so that's what I want to be happening there. Even if somebody's experiencing sadness and even despair in their life, I want them to come and begin to feel the hope and the promise and the light that's there inside them, but it's just behind all these clouds of worry. And I want that experience to be something that they can feel. So there's a resonance about life is beautiful. And your first quote, to be in love with life, that's what it is to lead the highest spiritual life.
So I show up and there's music playing.
There's music playing.
Is the music devotional? Is it just randomness? I mean...
Yeah. Recently it's been my music. We've had different people. We had the Indigi Femme to open, and they are so wonderful. They are great. Indigi Femme, I hope you're watching. You two are just angels and so beautiful. And but I write songs about all aspects of my own spiritual life, and hopefully that is something which other people relate to. And it's upbeat, and it's sometimes it's rockin', sometimes sort of jazz rockin', sometimes it's soulfully ballad-like, Eagles-like, West Coast. I mean, I have a number of styles, maybe more than I can even think of, that I draw from. And so it's feel-good music. It's music that makes you feel good. And people come into that environment with that. And then people are extremely warm. We have a great core of people, wonderful, wonderful core of people. Chad, Harriet, Brent, Patty, so many beautiful folks. My wife Miriam, Carol, David, just lovely folks. And everybody is extremely unified. There's a sense of brother, sisterhood. We're all part of the same family. It's not a cult-like thing, it's just a loving thing. And there's meditation, and there's a shorter talk than I used to give, maybe 10 minutes, but I talk around songs. There are 4 songs usually. We had singing bowls last week to get people into a really resonating place with each other and with the environment. We have people sharing spiritual experience. We have Chad stands up and will just give this most beautiful and inspiring spontaneous poetry that he's just written, and it's perfect and it reflects what we've experienced. We have prayers. We have sharing from people. It's a place that's meant to serve the highest and best in people, and to bring it out when they've maybe lost track of it.
So you don't utilize, quote, sacred texts?
No, we don't really. As a matter of fact, I've found that I used to quote a lot of things in my talks in days gone by, and would be uber prepared for every talk I ever gave. And people like it better when it's just being spoken in a very natural, organic, real way. So that's what I do, and that seems to be the gist. We've had some quotes read, like that beautiful Marianne Williamson quote about "Who are you to play small?" Your job is to bring the light, not to stand in the shadows. Is basically what she was saying. And we have people reading certain things that inspire. Sure, anything can happen there. There are no rules really. We're still evolving, but I don't want it to ever evolve into a crystallized thing, because then it could start to get moldy.
So it's basically almost, not the same focus, but like a Quaker service. People sit there until they're moved to say something. There's no leader per se. There's just...
Well, I think I'm the leader, and
okay.
I like to do that. I think that there needs to be a center, although I think Quaker meetings are just brilliant. I love them. I've been to many, and I think they're terrific. But and we might have moments where that will happen. There might be a time when we have 5 or 10 minutes of quiet together. It could happen. We haven't done that yet. And then people speaking out of that. That's a beautiful experience. But no, I think I bring a sort of anchor to it, and then there's so many people that also share and give. And I think the basic thing I can say about Spirit Rocks is it's there to help people live their dreams. That's what it's about.
How do you guide somebody? Do you guide somebody to help them? They come in, they say to you, Reverend, I'd love to live my dreams. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, you're right. Some people don't, and they haven't found them yet.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because inside they probably know, but there have been so many different messages parentally, from school, through conditioning, through television, through what they should be, through what friends have said, through what people have said to throw water on their dreams, that maybe they've suppressed them. They can't even remember what it was. And if they do remember, they think, yeah, but what can I do? I like animals. What could I do with that? Hey, well, maybe they find a way to make a living working with animals. Maybe they do it in a way that just fulfills their life while they're doing something else for an income. But it tends to come. We just make a space for that person. But I think, don't you, that my favorite teachers in my education were the people that just sparked me. They were just exciting people, and it didn't matter so much what they were teaching me. Hopefully I was reading all the texts and it was up on what the information was, but it was their enthusiasm that was so important. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. That's an Emerson idea, and everybody's idea, I think. But when somebody's got that, then that is a resonating force for other people, and that's what we want to bring into Spirit Rocks. Spirit Rocks, and we want to make people more awake to how fabulous it is to be living this privilege of life. Really, sometimes we go to sleep because we've been in the same setting for too long or whatever, and we forget just what a miracle it is just to be sitting here with David filming me over there, and you, Reverend Phil, sitting here and giving this wonderful interview, and it's just a kind of a majestic, miraculous greatness that I don't want anybody to miss. This experience of life. That's what being in love with life is.
Interesting. Because you asked the question, and all of my teachers inspired me in an entirely different way than you're talking about. They inspired me with their depth of soul, with their depth of spirit, how they saw the oneness in humanity.
That's what I'm talking about.
But it was not about creating anything in me. It wasn't like I didn't. Maybe it's terminology. I didn't walk away with joy. I walked away with awe.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's a form of joy.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. Right.
How deep this person's spirit was. How all-encompassing it was to be touched by it.
Yeah.
I mean, those were the inspirations for me. That more than. To me, I see a difference, which is perfectly fine, between what you were describing and because when you said that, I was just like, wow, never thought about it in those terms, But
oh, I like your terms; they're excellent, and that's also what I'm talking about. If I put a sort of joyful spin on it, it's just somebody is connecting you with that deeper place, and enthusiasm means the God within, and theos, and so that deeper place within you. When you're enthusiastic, it doesn't mean you're doing jumping jacks. It means you've sensed that deeper mystery.
Most definitely. I mean, that was the consistent part. Each one of my teachers came at a unique time and place with a slightly different gift. But each one of them were there to teach me what we talked about in the beginning. The Tao that could be named is not the Tao. The Tao that could be defined is not the Tao. That this thing, whatever I want to call it, is so vast, so powerful.
Yeah.
It is so beyond any concept. And I was given, a variety of teachers who just manifested different concepts. You were talking, and let's talk about them. You were influenced. You mentioned Dyer and a few other people. How do they influence you?
Wayne Dyer, I haven't read his stuff for a long time, and like so many people, early teachers aren't as important to you later, but he was my original gateway into this idea that there's much more to life than you were sort of aware of in this moment, and let me fill in some places for you. That was Wayne's kind of way of writing, and he would fill in the fact that, my God, there's unlimited potential in a person. There's absolute intelligence in the universe, and you can tap into that somehow. You can live your dreams because you can also manifest your destiny. That was one of his books, Manifest Your Destiny. You can learn ways to be in touch with that one important intelligence and creativity in the universe, so that you can use that. It can flow through you and augment who you are. As you become one with, you become strong. It's like the bundle of sticks, you bundle them up, and that you can't break that. One of those sticks, oh yeah, as a separate person, divided, you fall. But united with life and the life force, you have such a much more augmented power. So this is what Wayne Dyer talked to me about. Plus, I really liked Wayne's absolute authenticity and sincerity, and he kind of just let you know about his interior life, some of which would sound just a little bit wacky to me at the time, but at the same time I thought, but the he's inspired. He's really loving life. He's living every moment deeply. This is beautiful. So that's what got me into it. And then many other people I began to read after that, but he was my beginning, yeah.
And you talked about being a therapist. How did this support all this? How do your teachers, your experiences, how do you balance the right and the left brain? Let's call it that. I mean, I see the spirit as one side and the therapist as the other side. How do you make use of both of them? How do you balance them? How do you keep them?
That's a good question. I don't have a ready answer, but I would think that when people are using their inner skills and talents, they are using their entire brains, because there's left brainness, which is more rational. There's a right brainness, which is more creative. But I think when you're, say, involved in a work that really involves you, and you immerse yourself in it so much that you look at your watch, my God, 4 hours went by. It felt like 10 minutes. What happened? That kind of stuff. That's what I love. That's when time goes away. Eckhart Tolle is always talking about, the power of now. Let's get out of the idea of time. To me, that's the way to do it. You disappear into time when you're so thoroughly immersed in what you're doing that time is just a concept. It's not real anymore. It's not like it's ticking away and you're twiddling your thumbs. You have gone so far into experience of life itself that time is irrelevant. So I would say that any work that brings that about balances the two hemispheres of rationality and creativity. And I don't work with it in any overt way as a therapist, but I always try to involve the whole person. I think people get to be stuffy and rather stale when they aren't in touch with all the aspects of their personality. For instance, have you ever been around somebody who's just really humorless? They're just missing the fact that there's something that's inherently funny or just great. The Dalai Lama just goes around giggling all the time because the thing is so. What else do you do? What else do you say to the mystery? It's just fun. You just giggle like a child, and he likes to search out people that do the same. And so sometimes people get stuck in their left brain, let's say, that rational part, and they're very analytical. And to me, just like with John Lennon, he would always puncture that kind of pomposity. I've always thought that's a person who's not able to fully experience what it is to be alive. And so I think we have to have both hemispheres. Certainly we need to manage our lives well and to handle creating, getting through a day correctly. That's a rational pursuit. But we also have to have inspiration, fun, a sense of connection, a sense of that mystery, all those things happening. So I guess as a therapist, I just work globally that way from my point of view, but I don't have a technique of bringing that into being.
I got to make a couple of announcements. We're starting to run down on time.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll come back and let you make your announcements, and we'll have a parting thought or two.
Okay.
Okay, so announcement time. Unity Santa Fe, our good friends up at the 1212 Unity Way, which is one of those exits on the northern end. I guess it's the northern end of 599. So this coming Friday, the 28th, starting at 7 p.m. is Spiritual Cinema, and its movie is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, and that's on. There's a love offering, and we can't talk about money here. Tuesday, February 1st, there's a workshop that runs through March 8th titled Compassionate Communications, and that's facilitated by Diane Diller and Mercedes Kirkle, and there is a fee. And then Sundays, starting February 6th from 2 to 4, there's a 12-week class titled The Artist's Way, taught by Julia Cameron. Pre-registration is required by the 31st. Payment in full is due by February 6th. So for more information, Nancy Holtzman at 505-989-4433. A couple other quick announcements. This is, as you hear me say every week, and I will keep saying it, public access television. That means you are part of this, the watching public. So love to hear from you, comments about anything that we said here, questions about anything that's been said here, or if you have any thoughts about a show that you'd like to see me do, or maybe you want to do a show with me. My contact information has been running and will run at the end of the show again in the closing credits. Let me hear from you. Also, lastly, but not leastly, if those are words, I am a spiritual counselor. I am a state licensed counselor, and I am an ordained minister, and kind of blend that right and left brain stuff. I believe that without a spiritual component, there is no healing. What does that mean? Well, it's a long explanation. Call me. I'd love to talk to you. My services are on a donation basis, so there are no set fees. Be happy to work with you. If you think you're guided to feel that maybe I could be of service, call me. Let's talk about it. And just to let you know, next week we are running 3 weeks in a row with religious science ministers. Last week was Bernardo. Today is Reverend Van Austin. And next week is Reverend Gail Dillon. And each 3 conversations will be as different as the individual sitting in the seat with me. So tune in next week. Okay, sir. It's on you. Let them know how to get where, when, and that. They've been flashing your information as well.
Oh, good, yeah. Well, we meet at Little Wing, which is behind Candyman Music Store, which many people know, 851 St. Michael's Drive. It's about halfway down the drive, not too far from the hospital, across from the MVD, the MVD Express. And you enter through Calle Lorca, which is a side street off of St. Michael's.
Yeah.
And it's right behind Candyman Music Store in the Candyman Center. 10:30 on Sundays, that's when we meet. And it's a wonderful experience of prayer, meditation, music, sharing, everybody bringing their insights. And I lead it, and there's a talk, and it's a fun time. Number to reach me at is 505-428-0018, and the email is spiritrockssantafe, all one word, spiritrockssantafe@gmail.com.
And Santa Fe is spelled out.
Santa Fe is spelled out, yes, spiritrockssantafe@gmail.com. And our website is now transitioning from theinspirationcenter.org, which you can check out to see basically how we started, theinspirationcenter.org, and it's going to be spiritrocks.org. That is being built, and it will be ready in about 2 weeks. So that's our information. One more thing I want to point out, February 13, Bernardo Montserrat's church has a film on Rumi with Coleman Barks. The guy is a genius, and the musicians are great. Jai Uttal is playing in it. I think Deepak Chopra appears. It's going to be beautiful. So February 13th, I just read about it down at the Center for Spiritual Living, which is Bernardo's church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the few minutes we do have left, let's dive a little bit deeper into spirit as a healing entity. How does that work?
Oh, I think it is the healing entity. I think when we get into meditation, which I don't understand how you can really have a spiritual life without meditation. I'm talking about a deep and strong one. But when you get into meditation, as I'm sure you know well, Reverend Phil, there's an energy that comes up in you when your mind gets still that can saturate your whole being. It can flow through you. It's as if your heart opens, and a kind of loving consciousness or a loving intelligence fills your whole body. I think that is the healing intelligence. So that doctors know if you cut yourself, all they need to do is create the right environment by cleaning the cut, maybe stitching it, maybe covering it with a bandage, to best propitiate that natural healing power which is in everyone. And that's how all healing works. Doctors don't actually heal you. The body heals itself through the right interface with the medical world. So this is the spirit, I think, is the real healer. This intelligence of life itself. And so what spirituality does in my life, and I hope in the life of, I hope I can encourage that in other lives, is to bring that peaceful, loving energy into one's real, actual daily experience. And that is the healing force. That's the whole making force, healing and whole from the same root.
So if I were to say that what you just described was the preventative, and then the earlier what you had described was the curative, would that?
Yeah, I think it's all steady state, preventative and curative, all at once. It's all at once doing that. So if there's something that's anomalous, now some people, no, this is a little misnomer in New Thought. Sometimes people are in stage 4 cancer, and they're not probably going to beat it with the right propitiation of that energy. But at the same time, they can be the happiest people ever in those last weeks and months and years of their lives. Marianne Williamson once told me that she was working in a hospice with AIDS patients, and they were in advanced stages of AIDS, and they weren't going to recover. But they were the most grateful, beautiful people because of the kinds of teachings and understandings that were going on through her and through other people, and never happier in their lives. So the spirit can be healed, always. Sometimes the body can't be healed. But the spirit is what it's about.
That's our karmic path. To ignore, in some extent, not to not honor the body, but that I am more than the body.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I'm in spirit.
Yeah.
So I could have a body falling apart, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the more I could stay centered in spirit,
Yes.
then it's not, okay, I could deal with this. I could,
That's
exactly.
That's what inspiration is, in spirit. You're in spirit when you're inspired.
And that looks like it's a perfect closing. We're getting the signal. It's time to put a wrap on it.
Thank you, Reverend Phil.
I
This is
thank
great.
you so much.
It's so welcome.
And one of these
Pleasure.
days we will have you drag in your little thing and
that'd be
play it
great.
here.
I'd
That would
love
be
to.
great. I'm going to have to do a show on spiritual music. I've got some thoughts on that. Anyway, I want to thank you all for tuning in. This is, a way of approaching life. It's an ongoing. It's not just one show here. The words of the prophets are about getting a message about what life is and that you are part of that life. It doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. So you can change it. So until next week, what the Reverend has been saying. You are one with that spirit. Are you going to use it or you're not? And if you use it, you'd be amazed at how great you could feel. So thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, we're same time, same place next week. And until that time, walk in love and light. Blessings to you all.
I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.